Season 1, Episode 33 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Gods don't come down in life to mete out justice. The powerful do it.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and grizzled old veteran with a penchant for murder, Adam.
I'm your overly graphic description of a dripping, flesh-parting, greasy melee crit, Sarah.
And I am your foolish samurai warrior wielding a magic sword, Matt.
Thank you so much for being on, guys. We just got done with another session of Avernus last night. Suffice to say, a little freaked out. It's a little crazy where we're at right now, but it was a wonderful dive into hell. But we're really curious to see where the storyline goes. For anyone else out there who has played Avernus, I'm sure you know what we're talking about. But that reveal at the end of our session, I think, kind of made all of us gasp in the awe of what we saw. How are you guys coping with being in hell? It's a little bit like real life, isn't it? We're getting a first row look at it.
It's not the escapism that it was.
We're not escaping anything.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, a higher danger level. Well, I don't know. It's a pretty high danger level, I think, compared to what we've been used to. And,
I mean, we have to deal with some serious moral questions, like should we allow demons to eat babies? I mean, that's a really hard choice to make, right?
Yeah, I mean, but you have to ask yourself, the demons are going to get the babies anyway, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, you can't stop them from getting the babies, but
they're going to eat.
but anyway,
do they have to eat? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Let's get into the topic for today. Alas, the poor fighter. For such a necessary position in any party is often derided as almost a beginner class. They aren't leveling the battlefield with fireballs or calling a storm from the sky, not sneaking through the shadows or commanding animals to do their bidding. They have their weapons and their wits, and that's it. But there can be some serious depth in a fighter if you take some time with it. So that's what we'll be discussing today, the fighter class. Now, Sarah, currently in Avernus, you're playing a half-orc fighter. What's your opinion of the fighter class so far?
So this is my first 5e fighter, and I absolutely love her. Part of what I love, though, is it's because she's not just the class. There's this whole rounded character, outside of that class that just happens to be a fighter, and that's a big part of her nature. She has a savage side that loves to come out. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I actually really love it. In fact, I'm going so hard on the protect others kind of scale and doing as much damage as possible that it's become kind of fun for me.
Yeah.
I thought it would be a little bit, I don't know, snoozy, I guess.
Boring. Yeah, it's always thought of as a boring class for some reason, but you certainly are not making it boring.
Yeah, no, and I think part of it too, if I was just playing a fighter just to play a fighter, I think it could get stale, but I absolutely love how a side of her gets to come out during that, and she also gets to pursue her role in this world, her basically her mission, which is to protect Decorius and Jorn, and then the rest of the party kind of in that order.
well, thank you. Yes, Matt's character Decorius is the prime person to defend in Sarah's mind. Well, Matt, you know the history regarding fighter.
Yeah,
this goes way back. Why does the fighter have this reputation?
Well, because I think, starting out in first and second edition too, the fighter was a very simple, straightforward character. It's okay, you can wear any armor, you can use any weapon, and you've got a swag of hit points go get him, champ. You know, like there wasn't really, you know, at least initially as the fighter was envisioned in the basic rules, not really much to it. Now over time they added a lot more stuff. You know, second edition had, you know, kits and subclass, you know, not what we call kits, we call them subclasses now, but they had kits, and, you know, there was more on the arms and equipment guide. And I think third edition sort of broke open what the fighter could do with feats, because there were a lot of feats that involved things like, you know, disarming an opponent or knocking them over or tripping them, and different weapons played differently with those things. And so I think there were a lot of options, and I'm not going to comment on fourth edition because I didn't play fourth edition like a lot of people. But I think for fifth edition, I think comment that Steve's made in previous podcasts is very much true, that I think there really does need to be an arms and equipment guide, because fighters live and die by their weapons. And I think having sort of, you know, things you can do with different types of weapons that aren't really necessarily even feat related, but just like, yeah, a long spear could do this, an axe is different from a sword because X. I think that would really break open the fighter a lot more, because it would make the choice of weapons consequential, and the fighter having martial weapon proficiency, you know, is really, you know, going to be good at all of those things.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, especially even if it's not an arms guide, even if there were different things that a fighter could do with said equipment, you know, so a normal person might be able to use a sword in one way, but perhaps, you know, whether that's with subclass features or feats or whatever, the ability to use that weapon in a multitude of different ways might help. But you're right, like they live and die by the weapons and equipment that they have, and yet there's nothing in the subclasses that let them use it differently than any other class.
Yeah, no, it's really something that I mean, I don't even think it should have been a subclass feature. I think it should be like, yeah, you know, fighters, you know, can do this, and this with a weapon, you know, and it's just because they're fighters. I mean, that's, you know, that really, you know, exemplifies what a fighter is historically. I mean, fighters, you know, were identified by their weapon type: pikemen, halberdiers. You know, that was how they were known in warfare. So,
yeah. And this whole stereotype behind fighters goes, you know, all the way back with video games too. Like I remember a lot of the early video games, whether it was like, well, I guess Gauntlet had a barbarian as well, right?
Yeah, well, he wasn't wearing a shirt.
Gauntlet,
so
yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't, so it has to be a barbarian if there's no shirt. But like, yeah, going back to the Baldur's Gate games, going, you know, the fighter has always been like just Diablo. The fighter is a boring one. It's meant to take a ton of damage, but it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. You just get beat up on, and you kind of slowly whittle through attrition your enemies, and it's really too bad, because there's a lot of excitement that could be built within a fighter, and it just seems like kind of a default character, and that's too bad. And you know, hopefully we can dig into that a little bit. Let's get into some questions for the week. Our first post comes from Reddit user Yatharo Pro, who asks, champion fighter gameplay improve. Sorry, not improv, improve. Hi, everyone. I have a team of 6 players, level 6. Evocation Wizard, Elf Berserker, Barb Human, Homebrewed Horizon Walker, Ranger, Half Elf, Devotion Paladin, Dwarf, Trickery Rogue Cleric, Champion Fighter, Dwarf. So we played like 90 hours already with many combat situations, and I have this feeling that the champion among all those players, Barb accepted, lacks versatility. It's not a problem for the barbarian because he is fine being the berserk meatbag, but I think the fighter doesn't enjoy so much, having so few possible actions. How could I change this? I know multi-classing could be an option in the long run, but it's too far away. Any ideas? So, Matt, this centers in on one of the common problems people have with fighters. They think it all ends up boiling down to, I swing my sword and then they're done. How can players spice things up a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably this issue is probably exacerbated with the champion, because the champion is, I think, mechanically a bit simpler than a lot of the other subclasses, and maybe Sarah can speak to that some more, because I think she's playing the champion in Avernus.
I think so.
But I think one of, I mean, obviously you're not, I mean, multi-classing is still far away, but I think for a build like that, I think feats really are the things that can add tactical options to the class. So I mean, obviously, I don't know. He didn't say exactly what weapon type the character prefers, but with feats, you don't necessarily do more damage, but it can change your tactical options. So if you're going sword and board, we've talked about Shield Master in previous podcasts, and Shield Master opens up a whole new set of things you can do with your bonus action. Mobile, very useful if you want to play kind of a hit and run sort of fighter. And Decorius and Avernus is actually built that way, even though the rest of the party doesn't seem to play into that strategy. It's actually a really effective strategy, especially with Booming Blade. But also even a feat that gives you cantrip or spell options, like any of those spellcaster feats. Suddenly that gives your character this other thing they can do, which maybe you won't do all the time, but when you do, it can sort of change or control the flow of the battlefield. Because like an extra trick or two to pull, especially with the options in Tasha's, which I haven't been through all of Tasha's Cauldron yet, but especially with the options in there, those really could broaden what the character can do. And as we mentioned in the previous part of the conversation, that if there were new options for weapons, an arms and equipment guide or similar, that type of thing would help a lot.
Yeah. Well, and part of the problem with where they're at right now, they're level 6. So in terms of feats, you got 2 more levels, at least until a feat hits, unless the DM allows a retcon of some kind.
Yeah.
But Sarah, you're currently playing a champion. How can this player spice things up, or how can the DM make things more interesting for this fighter champion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I absolutely agree with Matt. Like the feats are a great way for to spice things up a little differently. The other thing, give maybe the character a mission like what I have. So that kind of drove, for example, me taking Sentinel. So now I can protect all my people even better. And I'm going to take Orcish Fury at level 6 because that'll take advantage of my race, as well as the fact that I go down and get back up and I get one more hit, and that happens quite a bit. So yeah, but it adds flavor, right? It makes her absolutely a powerhouse up front, so that hopefully other people can do other things. Yeah, I think it's going to come down, I think, more to the role play around it. I think that would be the best way to spice it up, because it really is just like a straightforward class. And if this person's getting bored, I think you just need to investigate, why are they getting bored? Is it that there's not enough damage? Because a lot of us are damage whores, so to speak, and we love, like, look at that, I did 60 or whatever. You want to celebrate. Yeah. But if they're not, if they just want something a little bit more thinking and stuff, then there might be, maybe you can give them a little bit of a limitation that they have to think around until they can maybe get to a feat where they could adopt some of those cantrips and stuff, or let them change their class, basically.
Yeah, or change the battlefield. I mean, I think a lot of times we get into this, the characters are standing toe to toe and just hitting it back and forth. But creating scenarios where it's a moving battle, or you're climbing and fighting, or something like that, where some of the skills that the character has have to be used as part of the field of combat can make it a little more interesting than just the standard I hit, I do damage type of thing.
Yeah, encounter design can have a huge effect here, and if the DM is noticing that the fighter's not having as much fun, from the DM side, you can incorporate more skill checks that are geared towards the fighter, to involve that fighter a bit more, and as the player character, looking for environment-based things that you can do, because you have the hit points that you can take those opportunity attacks. You can, kind of move around and try some things without the fear of instant death, like some of the spellcasters. So maybe as a player, looking around the room and seeing what you can do. Can you bring that beam down and bring the ceiling down on the enemies? Is there something that you can do to affect the battlefield in a way other than just swinging your sword and hitting for X amount of hit points. And over on the DM side, like, keep in mind with encounter building, you're absolutely right, Matt. Too often it's, this side is the good side, this side's the bad side, and they smack and meet in the middle, and hit points decrease. Done and done. Well, if they're surrounded, if people are getting dragged off, if there's a part of a chase scene that's involved in it, or the terrain itself, maybe it's underwater, or maybe it's in quicksand or whatever, find ways to
and hot liquid magma.
Yeah, exactly. So find ways to incorporate some specific skill checks. They're going to be good in athletics and acrobatics, probably at least athletics. They're going to probably have good constitution. So find some ways to highlight that class that might juice things up a little bit, because it can be very boring if all that character is doing is swinging their weapon and hitting. So I completely understand. Hopefully that gives you some ideas, and would love to hear how your fighter's getting along in your campaign.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It's time for Potomac RPG News. So the holidays are fast approaching, and Scott Baird over at ScreenRant.com put out the Dungeons & Dragons 2020 Holiday Gift Guide. Some pretty common things on here, but as a top 10 list of gift items, I guess I was a little bit disappointed. Sarah, what do you think on this? Anything on this list on your wish list?
Honestly, I have everything already that I would want.
I know,
So
right?
we have Ride of the Frost Maiden, and we have Tasha's Cauldron. So those are the big ones. We have Strahd too. So I mean, honestly, I agree. There wasn't really a lot of there wasn't any surprises. If you are a D&D fan, you already know about everything on that list. I really would have loved something very novel, or unique, or nostalgic, or something that would have been super special at an emotional level that I could maybe give my husband for Christmas. But and there wasn't anything really wowing in my opinion, which isn't to say it's all bad. It's just we already knew about it.
Well, it's almost like a D&D gift guide for someone who's never played D&D before.
Yeah, it's like a starter. Yeah, it's kind of like
starter gifts. Yeah. Well, how about you, Matt? Anything on this list?
No, I felt the same way. I mean, although I might be tempted to maybe get a D&D, shirt or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's really, it's stuff that we knew was out, that's been out. I don't know anything about Dungeon Mayhem. I guess it's a card minis type of game.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it looks, yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't know how the board games are, but yeah, I mean, Curse of Strahd is of course really cool if you're into Ravenloft, and they have, the Tasha's Cauldron, they put it number 1. But again, it's nothing that that's really, I mean, Tasha's Cauldron, I guess, is probably the newest thing on there. And that's been sort of hyped up in the last few weeks anyway. So there isn't really any surprises on the list, I guess.
Yeah, same here. And really, given how much we see on Twitter and social media of all the different cool things that are out there, it doesn't take too much work to come up with some really cool stuff. I mean, for them to just put on Dungeons and Dragons clothing as if it's just this broad topic. I mean, there's a lot of cool places out there that are doing really interesting things that aren't that hard to find. I mean, hell, where's Found Familiar, right? Where's the coffee? D&D based coffee. Where's that at? Another one that exactly, Wormwood. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a zillion things you can get there.
There absolutely is. There's a company who does cantrip candles. I don't know if you've heard of this, where they have these candles that are scented like the locations that you're at. So especially with us being about 6 months away from being in person again, you can get these packs of samples, if you will, that have things like different scents, like swamp or forest, or
How
walk in the
cool.
woods, a
Oh, is there a
bakery of
sewers?
sorts.
Is there a sewers candle?
I don't know if there's a sewer, but I wouldn't doubt it. There's secret. I'm trying to zoom in on these. Oh, there's Dragon Fields library. There's a library one. That's great. So they're basically meant to set a feel, an olfactory feel, of the setting that you're in, and there's dozens of them, and it's very, very cool. Now I know they sell out within a heartbeat, like as soon as they're currently sold out right now, but they basically have these production lines, and they announce it, and then everyone hops online to try to get it. Those are really cool ideas. I'd love to see more of that kind of stuff in these holiday gift guides, things
Yeah.
that are outside of just the books. We all know about the books. We don't need the books
Yeah.
anymore. We know where to get them. We want the cool accessories that no one else has. So if we'll have those links in the show notes if anyone's interested to anything that we've mentioned today. But there are so many items up there. But let's get into another topic here. So next up, Modifius Entertainment has announced that they're releasing a new Dune TTRPG called Dune Adventures in the
Woohoo!
Imperium.
I am
With
so
the
excited.
movie coming out. Yeah, I know, right? With the movie coming out next year and such classic novel, that this might be pretty cool. Matt, any interest from you in the power of the spice?
Oh, absolutely. The spice must flow.
Must flow.
So I think Dune has always been the challenge for Dune as a novel as a setting has always been that it's been sort of unfilmable, right? You have the David Lynch one, we have the Sci-Fi Channel one, and now there's the new one coming out, and so now I guess on those coattails we have the RPG coming out, and I think a key aspect of the RPG will have to be not just combat, which pretty much anyone can do, but rules for the intrigue and politics.
Yes.
That focus. And I know other games have tried that. I think there was a Game of Thrones RPG that had an intrigue resolution system. I don't really know it that well. But I think that will be a key element, not just the survival. And it is a rich setting to do. I mean, it's a very unmined setting. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
Sure. Well, Sarah, how about you? You interested in Dune?
I am super psyched about this, and the only way that enthusiasm is going to stay as high as it is if we do have some really, really solid political intrigue, because that's what makes Dune so special. The politics, the land grabs, what's going on underneath, like who's manipulating who, and to be able to explore that in a TTRPG in a way that where you get to play your intellect out a little bit, as well as not just rely only on dice to do things. I think that would be so fun. And I want to like some risk level sort of land shifts, like or planet shifts, depending on what level we're talking about, to happen slowly over time, over the course of a campaign. I want it to just, I don't know, I just want the stakes to be huge and the landscape to be changeable, if that makes sense. I don't know if they're going to do that, but that would just make me a really, really happy player.
No, that's a great thought. And I think the danger when it comes to these properties is, we hear Dune and we get a mental image, but it really comes down to the system behind it. Because you could put Dune, the setting, pretty much into any system out there, but can they do a system that's worthy of the setting that they're in? And that's, we'll have to see what it looks like when it comes out, but it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, there's so many great franchises out there, like Fallout or Firefly, all these where the RPG itself, the TTRPG itself, just didn't quite meet those expectations, because the system is kind of what drives all those mechanics underneath the story. So you can have the greatest setting in the world, but if the system stinks, then you're not going to have as much fun as you'd like. So really curious to see what kind of system they go with.
Yeah,
a lot
I
of
just
it
want
comes
to
down
say,
to system. Go.
No, go ahead, Matt. You started. Go ahead.
All right. I was just going to say a lot of it. You're right. A lot of it comes down to system design, and we haven't done a podcast on that, but I think there's a lot to be said about when you design a system, you have to choose the areas that you're going to focus on, and if you're going for something that's at least somewhat simulationist, or even gamist, you need to have a system that works well for that particular thing, whether it's spaceships or interstellar intrigue or whatever. You have to have an element in that system that can accommodate that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Sarah?
want this is what I want, and I don't know if they're gonna do it. I want the PvP sort of aspect of being able to go up against you and Matt and everyone else at the table in some sort of intellectual dueling, with some intrigue and stuff. We'll probably all be in the same campaign, and maybe one of us will be working for someone else or whatever. But if there was a way though to do that, where we're like playing chess almost like at a fantasy level. With the politics and stuff, that is what I'm hungry for. Give me something really, really meaty to go up against my friends with. I don't know. That would be my joy right now.
No, that'd be interesting. PvP is always that's a dicey one to get into, but especially if it's at the intellectual level, it might be a little bit different. But you'll need a group that's mature enough to handle the intra-party intrigue that would happen in that. But you're right, like the inclusion of that would be a huge step forward in TTRPGs. I mean, when it comes to systems, you're right, Matt, when you say it has to be kind of focused around whatever the focus of the setting is, and we kind of experienced that in the pirate adventure, because there were no ship rules except for Ghosts of Saltmarsh for 5e on ships, and honestly, I found the ship-to-ship combat pretty lacking.
Yeah,
They
took
tried
a long time.
Oh, so long.
Took a long
It's such a long time
But it was
to
so
do a
novel.
ship combat. Yeah, it was a great thing to try and kind of experience and say that, okay, we've done ship to ship combat, but just in terms of the rule set around that in Ghost of Saltmarsh, it was a slog to get through that. So absolutely, whatever the focus of the setting is, there better be a really good system of resolution around it that allows players to experience it without it being dragged down into the muck. So it'll be interesting. If you're interested, the movie comes out next year, of course, because of COVID. The pre-order for the TTRPG is sometime in December here, so keep your eyes peeled for that. So we're going to take a quick step out, but stick around. We'll be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D, and they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user Calamitous Ardor, who asks, what's up with the knight obsession when it comes to fighter subclasses? No, but really, out of 10 published subclasses, 3 to 4 are explicitly knights, and a 5th one is basically the same. We have Echo Knight, Rune Knight, Eldritch Knight, Banneret, more often referred to as Purple Dragon Knight, and clearly a knight in the full fluff snippet, and Cavalier, which is arguably a synonym of knight. Is this intentional, or more like the trend of slapping arcane or eldritch onto everything? I understand that the less formal martial aspects clash with barbarian's theme, but so does knight feel very paladin-esque. I don't mind it much personally, but now I can't get it out of my head. So, Matt, what's up with the knight classification? Why is everyone a damn knight?
Knights.
Knights.
Thinking of the King Arthur Knights of Justice cartoon. I think part of it is I think at some level it's kind of like a marketing thing, right? So I think most people associate knight with heavy armor and bravery, and so I think just calling it a knight makes it sound cool. It's probably better than calling it like a rune yeoman or a rune mercenary. I think it just sounds more heroic, right?
Yeah.
A rune man at arms. So I think that's probably the reason behind it. But at some level, it's a little bit of a problem because obviously knight has a certain depending on your Western European setting, has a social connotation. I mean, even a banneret or a banneret actually was historically a knight that had, I think, was it 5 or 10 knights under him was called a banneret. Like a lot of these these terms actually have history, some historical context. So when you use it to describe a class, you're kind of ditching any kind of social or historical context that it has, which could be a problem. I mean, historically, warriors were identified by their weapon, but D&D's chosen not to do subclasses like by weapon, at least in 5e.
Yeah.
But what do we call it? Pikeman, halberdier, and had stuff around that. And I think we should have more stuff around that, but they're not
Agreed.
subclasses. But I think the other problem is, it's associated. It has a strong association with Western Europe. I mean, if this was the Russian game, a Russian game, they'd all be, it would be the Rune Bogatyr or something like that. And I think
I would love that.
Yeah, but I think it just creates kind of a weird kind of conflict between social class and combat style. So it's an unfortunate use of the nomenclature, but I understand why, because of how we associate knight with, kind of the armored brave warrior, even though historically that may not have been very true.
Yeah, there's so much romance too about knights throughout. And when I say romance, I mean like just this allure, for a lot of people throughout history. I mean, Arthurian legend that's been basically retold over and over again in so many different ways. And there's always this fascination about, that time when, there was a code of honor for some, and, the way that they worked, the brotherly sort of kind of bonding that went on, the fact that they had a higher mission in some cases, like to get the Holy Grail. So I think there's a yeah. So I think that's always going to be like there, the way that maybe we kind of romanticize like being ladies or lords or kings or even Roman soldiers right back then. Just because of the history. And I think also just going back to our opening, I think that's also why fighters get a default, because it's the world we were most exposed to, the class we were most exposed to just in general as a culture. And sort of stuff like mages and stuff weren't allowed. You weren't allowed to,
fighters and rogues are real.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think that paladin should be under the hero. I don't think it needs to be its own separate class. I think it is a fighter that just happens to be more on the cleric side of things, whereas your eldritch knight is more on the the spellcasting side of things for the arcane. So yeah. Anyway.
That's a good point. And honestly, when I first read this question, I was like, who cares? But then the more I thought about it, it's like, you know what? Why is it always nice? And I agree, Matt, in terms of like, it's a very Western European kind of motif that you get from that. And then Sarah, when you're talking about some of these subclasses, actually seem to fit better under other classes rather than fighters. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm surprised that only one of the subclasses are a warrior. A warrior is kind of the most common fighter word, and yet it's only used for Psy warrior, none of the others. So, this focus on knights, it is a romanced kind of imagery that comes up with the word knight. So I can kind of understand it, but boy, there's a lot of options out there. You'd think that they'd mix it up a little bit and not have half of them be knights. But
yeah, I would have liked to see like a mercenary subclass. I mean, historically,
absolutely.
most throughout Europe, Middle Ages, you had a ton of mercenary companies, and I
want to see a Valkyrie class.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Yeah,
Like, why have
that'd
we
be
forgotten all the
cool.
women?
Yeah, that'd be really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. Come on, D&D, get it together. Get some more variety in your names here. So, yeah, it was kind of a fun question just to kind of look at. So, Calamitous Ardor, we completely agree. We don't understand it either. That is a weird obsession to have, and hopefully they choose to mix it up in the future. But right now, we're going to get into another segment. The fighter has no shortage of great subclasses to go for, but some leave a little to be desired. So let's take a look at our favorite fighter subclasses in our segment. Pick is in.
Here we go now.
Welcome to Pick is In, where we give our expert and not so expert top ranked pick in whatever we're talking about. In today's episode, we'll be ranking the fighter subclasses. So here's how it'll work. We'll each give our top pick for a fighter subclass, then we'll viciously defend our pick against each other, and our listeners will have the chance to vote on our Twitter poll which person they think had the best pick, or at least the best argument for it. You two ready?
Yeah.
I'm in.
All right, let's get into it here. So, Sarah, we'll turn to you first on this. We have the fighter page up here looking through the different subclasses. Is there one that stands out to you as the best subclass for a fighter?
So I haven't played it yet, but the next one I would play because it's not only just being like a warrior, it also has some ulterior benefits, is the Rune Knight. And here's why. So you get kind of the effect of spells with these runes, but you can customize them for the environment that you're going into. So like if we're in Avernus, then I'm probably going to want to make sure that the runes on my equipment are more focused against things that I'm going to encounter in Avernus. Why? Well, it's going to make me last longer, so I can continue to do damage. It's also going to save my clerics on healing and that action economy. So I just feel like it's a really, really cool blend where you get to you can kind of throw some magic, but you also get some resistances or advantages on saving throws in areas where you might need them, and you can still kick ass. So that's my vote.
Nice, that's a good pick. Well, Matt, how about you?
Well, I was thinking of fitting the Rune Knight. Sarah jumped in front of me, although she missed one of the big advantages of the class, which is the growth ability. Actually makes them very good at grappling and shoving. But I'm going to go with my first choice, which I think still just edges it out, and I think this is kind of the generic choice that most people will pick. Is the Battle Master. I mean, the Battle Master just has a lot of options that, frankly, I think all fighters should have had at some level. There's a lot of control that you can do. It's not just about hitting and doing damage with them, but there's things about letting your companions take actions, increasing your range, disarming the opponent, tripping the opponent, parrying with your reaction. Giving temporary hit points to your companions. There's just a lot of things you can do, and they're short rest recharge abilities, so you can use them fairly frequently. And to just give you an example how cool it could be, even though it may or may not have worked, is we were fighting, without giving too much away about Avernus, there was this guy we had to fight at one point who had a big nasty sword, a very nasty sword. Mm-hmm. And it would have been really, really cool if someone could have disarmed him. And if someone maybe grabbed this ready in action and grabbed the sword when it was disarmed. I mean, it can change. It can change kind of the standard flow of the fight really well. And I think the Battle Master, a lot of those things should have been sort of, at some level default fighter abilities, with the Battle Master just being better at them. But the Battle Master is the one who has them. You can get access to them through some feats to a lesser extent. But I just think the flexibility and the options that it gives really make the class, what it should be.
Yeah, and going back to the early question that we had, now that player was a champion, but in terms of making the battlefield an interesting place, Battle Master offers the variety that a lot of people are looking for when it comes to a fighter. There are so many uh, different things that you can do with those battle master maneuvers or whatever they're called, to change things up. That is not just swinging your sword, because you're also, goading attack or disarming strike or whatever else that's adding not only a lot of flavor to it, but some mechanically different things that you can do. So I think that's a great choice there, Matt. For me, I haven't played it yet, and I know I think it's fairly new. The Psy Warrior, in my mind, is pretty darn cool. And there's a couple things that I look for whenever I'm playing a fighter or martial character. I really like to protect other people, and the protective field that you get, where you're able to reduce the damage taken by somebody else. So, for a protective field, it's within 30 feet. If they take damage, you can basically use your psionic energy to reduce that damage. And the psionic strike, the telekinetic movement, there's a lot of cool kind of mobility and flexibility things in here. Like the psi-powered leap, I thought was pretty cool at 7th level, where you can gain a flying speed equal to twice your walking speed.
And fly speed's hard to come by in 5e.
Yeah, super hard to. I mean, just imagine being able to fly 120 feet for a turn.
Oh yeah,
just for a turn. That can change a battlefield in seconds, and I think it's a really cool thing. I know psionic abilities are related to Dark Sun, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting there's going to be more robust rules for psionics as they come out with that. So there may be a lot more you can do with this class and psionic feats in the future.
Yeah. So that would be my choice for Psy Warrior. Is there any subclass that you guys stay away from at all costs?
Gunslinger.
Gunslinger? Why?
Yeah, not because it's a bad class. I don't know. Like when you bring gunpowder into a fantasy setting, it becomes not, for me, not the traditional fantasy D&D fantasy setting. It becomes something, much later, like, the 18th century or something like that. And that's not the setting that I usually prefer unless we're going to be playing pirates. So.
All right. Well, how about you, Matt? Anything you stay away from?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't think any of us have been interested in playing arcane archers. I think if you want to be an archer, there's kind of better ways to do it.
Be a ranger or be nothing.
Or be a rogue. Or a rogue. Rogue or a mix of ranger rogue can be good classes. I think the options that you get with the arcane archer are they're kind of limited in use. You can't use them that much. And I think, which is too bad, because like in 3rd edition and Pathfinder, the arcane archer classes were actually like pretty awesome. Basically, it was like you attach a spell to an arrow, and like you're fighting wizards, and you put an anti-magic field on that arrow, and suddenly they're in an anti-magic field, and you've got them. There was a lot of really cool stuff you could do with the arcane archer in earlier editions. And I feel the fighter subclass for 5e, that's arcane archer, doesn't live up to that. It's kind of like you're playing Hawkeye or Green Arrow a little bit, but only limited use. You only have like a couple of them per long rest or whatever.
I was thinking arcane archer as well. It's just one of those where it's I think they shoehorned that in and didn't really find a way to make it more fighter specific, that would really give it the benefits that would make you want to stay away from ranger or rogue and go fighter.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally it was sort of a hybrid mage warrior kind of class that was like really lore wise, kind of for elves, right? It's like, all right, we're fighter mages. Well, instead of being melee fighter mages, we're archer fighter mages. And it made sense, and they actually had in previous edition, I think, good mechanics for it. I just think the 5e1 it's not enough use. I mean, you get some cool options, but I think it's like 2 uses per long rest or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
But it is what it is. I mean, I like all of your top picks. I think are great. I'm surprised no one took samurai. Just looking through, there's some really cool abilities for samurai, but battle master especially has been the most popular one that I've seen. But definitely with the Rune Knight, that's a really cool theme around it, really interesting things that you can do. I'm surprised no one took Cavalier as the worst option, because how many
Oh, it's a
campaigns have
horse
we
problem.
played in that make
Yeah.
use of mounts?
That's an old problem, though. That's not particular to 5e. That's been a problem for a long time. Is that someone's got their horse and it's like, all right, you're going through a 5-foot passageway or anything. It's like, well, sorry, horse, I gotta leave you behind.
And all
Yeah,
my
the whole
abilities.
dungeon part of Dungeons and Dragons kind of excludes
Yeah,
horses.
that's been a problem in multiple editions because historically, I mean, horses are devastating in warfare. I mean, cavalry was dominated the battlefield, but then when you get to the dungeon crawl aspect, it's like, all right, horse, I'll see you when I get back, and you just tether around side and hope he doesn't get eaten by something,
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, those were our picks. Hop over to our Twitter poll and make your vote heard as to who you agreed with the most. Let's get into the last post of the week. This comes from Reddit user Musical Theater Guy, who asks, how to play samurai without appropriating. Hello all. So one of my white players had decided he wanted to play the samurai fighter and lean into a lot of the samurai movie tropes. This is a game we're going to be sharing with the world, so I want to be cautious about doing so without offending, alienating, or making anyone uncomfortable. Do you all have any thoughts on how I, also white, can do this culturally safely? So, Sarah, what's a good way to handle this? Obviously, anyone can play a samurai if they want, but this is a good question to consider. What do you think?
Well, I think first of all, don't do the voice. Like, just don't do the anime voice. I think that would come across as incredibly offensive to some people.
Yeah.
I think that if you are going to play it and it's going to be broadcast in a way it'll be consumed, then definitely maybe do your research. If you're referring to the samurai clothing, make sure you're naming it correctly and not just saying pants or something like that. And then celebrate the artistry of it, the honor, but try not to play the tropes, if that makes sense. The stunted sort of talking gruff, like just under the breath. Like I guess try to be authentic. I think that would be the best way to sort of honor it, because it is directly borrowed from a culture that we celebrate here. And I just want to you want to do it justice, right? I don't know that you're going to end up pleasing everyone 100% of the time anyway, but that would be the best way, is just to show your love of it. Yeah.
The thing that gives me great pause here is the mention of samurai movie tropes. And whenever you get into movie tropes, what you're talking about is stereotypes. And
Yes.
that is that's real dangerous ground to tread, especially if you're going to be broadcasting this anywhere. Matt, what do you think?
So, all right. So my response, I'm actually gonna be a little bit. I'm gonna take sort of maybe the counter side here. So, so some people may have been paying attention. I did kind of a little bit of the opening of Samurai Jack in the opening, which I happen to think is an amazing cartoon, by the way.
Absolutely.
I would say that if you look at post-war Japan, the Japanese have made quite a point of making movies and exporting samurai movies. I mean, and like Sarah said about authenticity, like I would say, ignore American movies, But I think there's nothing wrong with looking to Japanese movies for inspiration. If you want to look to Akira Kurosawa movies, or if you want to look at the one with the blind samurai, that's like a huge franchise, right? I mean, there's really a lot of Japanese source material to look at, and are they historically accurate? Maybe semi. I mean, I'm sure the Japanese have taken their own liberties with it, but the Japanese have, specifically, commercialized and exported, the idea. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a white person playing the tropes, because hey, that's marketing. But I think Sarah's right that you should look to Japanese source material and not American source material to do it. So I think I think that's fine. I think part of the problem with the game is the samurai class is really it could be anything. It's not particularly culturally linked or linked to Japan. And I think it's very much divorced from a lot of the social and cultural expectations that samurai lived under. And I think if you were really going for authenticity, you would have to somehow incorporate that. And one of the problems with D&D is you are in a sort of generic Europeanish setting, and the monk has the same problem. It's that it's a class that the class doesn't really fit the setting perfectly, and so unless you were playing in Fantasy Asia, it would sort of stick out. Or if you had some reason that a particular culture in this Western Europeans had something that was more like feudal Japan. So that's sort of my issue with it. It isn't so much that a white person's playing a samurai. That doesn't really bother me. I have no problem with a Japanese person playing a European knight or a Russian bogatyr for that matter. I think it's just, like Sarah said, I think you want to make sure that you're delving into correct or at least somewhat correct source material for your ideas.
Especially for something for public consumption, because it's I can turn real quick, and you better have done your homework to make sure that you're not overstepping. So a good question there, musical theater guy. I would love to hear how it goes, with your player's character, and hope you have fun with it. But that's going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacripg.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/potomacrpg. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/potomacripg. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Sarah and Matt. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
never stop playing.
Oh, I'm an idiot.